But we begin tonight with President Obama's trip to Texas today, and President Bush the elder using that trip as an occasion to take a weird, unexpected swipe at me and Keith Olbermann. The occasion of the meeting of the presidents was the 20th anniversary of President Bush's 1,000 Points of Light call to service during his inaugural. Tonight in Texas, both presidents gave speeches about the importance of volunteerism and public service, but the political subtext of this visit is starting to overtake the official text of why these presidents got together. It may be because this time last year, a young conservative group at the site of today's event, Texas A&M, sponsored an anti-Obama carnival in which they asked passers-by to throw eggs at a photo of Mr. Obama. After that same group announced plans to protest President Obama's arrival on campus today, Mr. Bush published an open letter on the front page of Texas A&M's college newspaper, a letter essentially calling for civility on the occasion of this visit. And this is where the story gets weird. In a follow-up interview with CBS Radio today about that call for civility, the former president, out of nowhere, volunteered his own theory on where the breakdown in civil discourse is coming from.
I don't like it. I think the cables have a lot to do with it. I'm thinking back to when I was president, we got tons of criticism, but it didn't seem day in and day out quite as personal as some of these talk show people. And it's not just the right. There's plenty of people on the left. If you want me to name a couple of names, I'll be glad to do that for you.
Go ahead.
Keith Olbermann and Rachel Maddow. I mean, here's a couple of sick puppies.
Reached for comment while trying on his adorable Halloween costume. My puppy said, Sorry. Why is the former president calling me and Keith Olbermann sick puppies? I honestly do not know, but here's what he said next.
And the way they treat my son and treat anybody that's opposed to their point of view is just horrible.
Joining us now by phone is my collaborator in Sick Puppyhood, Keith Olbermann, who is actually sick, as in ill tonight, but he's not a puppy. Hi, Keith. Got to ask you what you make of all this.
Well, I think I can speak on your behalf here and say that we're very grateful for the former president's concern about our health.
Yes.
It's easy to miss the irony here. What he's complaining about in terms of personalized complaint about other politicians, the current era of it, name-calling, he's the father of it. And I don't mean he's the father of George W. Bush. I mean he's the father of the process that took us to the place we are now. He is the man who employed Roger Ailes. He and Roger Ailes are the men who ran the Willie Horton ad against Mike Dukakis. He and Roger Ailes are the people who played the scam on Dan Rather. So it's very ironic to hear George H.W. Bush from this lofty perch and with real, I thought I heard anger in his voice against you and me, and mispronouncing your name, which adds to his credibility, just sort of ignoring the fact, hey, you don't like this, buddy? It's your responsibility. You fix it. You started it.
It was interesting to me, Keith, that he was eager to volunteer us by name. He actually said, if you'd like me to volunteer names, I've got them for you. I wonder if this is seen by the Bush family as some sort of, return fire against the current White House sort of taking on Fox News recently.
Well, I don't know. I mean, my assumption is, and this is where I give the former president something of a pass on this, that you'd have a blind spot. If your son had been president of the United States, you'd have a blind spot about how well or poorly he did. If your son happened to be George W. Bush, the blind spot would be the size of a galaxy. And you'd have to assume that criticism of him must necessarily be wrong and must necessarily be personal and vituperative, as opposed to being predicated on what actually happened during that administration. I mean, we've seen President Bush get weepy talking about Jeb in a presidential context, and the way things turned out, there's got to be some sort of weird mixture of psychology going on in there. I don't think it's necessarily retributive. I don't know that Mr. Bush is any more pleased with what Fox News became than anybody else is. But I don't know that it's necessarily that. But it's so strange for him to assail name-calling and then call us names. But we saw that, Mr. McCain did that last year, too. There's something about people who start a certain tenor or give a certain tenor to American political life, or this is over the centuries, this isn't just recently, but there's something about this. When they take us down a path, if anybody else goes down that path who disagrees with them, they are startled, outraged, and take huge umbrage because only they are correct. And so this is what I think President Bush did, and I think it's kind of a sad legacy to a sad presidency.
Yeah, it's sort of the only incivility they recognize is that.
Well, at least they spelled my name right, or something like that.
Keith Olbermann, thank you for taking time to join us on your night off. I really appreciate it, Keith. Grrr.
Feel better.
Thanks, Keith. Appreciate it. All right, joining us now is Ron Suskind, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, and he is author most recently of the book The Way of the World, a story of truth and hope in an age of extremism. Ron, thanks very much for coming on the show. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Sick puppy, you.
You covered both Presidents Bush extensively. I have to ask you, based on what you know about the elder President Bush, of all the people and the institutions he could have singled out as the root cause of the breakdown in civility in this country, why do you think he singled out the cables and me and Keith specifically?
Well, you know, actually, I think when you read the whole thing or you see the whole thing, I think the you and Keith thing at the end was a bit of a throwaway. You've actually seen this from the Bush presidency, Bush 41. He sort of makes a coherent case and then throws a kind of zinger, a kind of ad hominem attack, personal, and that's not really the point. I think really what he's talking about here is Fox News. The Fox News, Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck kind of triumvirate and how they've stolen the Republican Party. And that's in a way George H.W. Bush, as an old guard traditional Republican, says, hey, wait, that's my party and these are not my people. And if you look at the whole sum of what he's saying, I think in large measure it's a way to try to distance old traditional Republicans from the new Republican Party. And I think that you and Keith are just throwaway lines to show, oh, right, I'm even-handed, and it happens on the left, too.
It's interesting. I have found, I get asked a lot of questions about media and about opinion versus reportage and media because of the different jobs that I've had. And as I think the right has become more extreme, as Fox has become more extreme, particularly with their host, Mr. Beck, now, I have been accused of being more extreme than I've ever been accused of before. I haven't changed, but I think people are looking for parity as a way of saying that there's a sort of incivility on both sides, just because that's a more convenient political point to make than saying that one side is really way more out of line than anybody else has ever seen.
Well, I mean, I think George H.W. Bush understands that he has some responsibility for this. He's probably speaking in a way from some summoned guilt. You know, Lee Atwater and George H.W. Bush, Roger Ailes, they were behind, in a way, the start of modern-day attack politics, which is now spread 24/7. In a way, you look at Fox News and some of the compadres there, it's sort of Willie Horton 24/7. They're at the start of that in a kind of ends-means play that George H.W. Bush, well, engaged deeply in. I don't care how you get there, just get there, win first. The rest is for later or never. That's really started in George H.W. Bush's time. I think he's probably troubled, as many people are, at how it has grown and spread, deepened and widened. And in a way, I think this is his way of saying, geez, those guys who are attacking this president, which is what he's talking about, Obama, he says it's unfair, those guys are not my people. That's not my Republican Party. I'm not a Fox News guy. I think that's what the old president is saying.
Ron, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about this tonight is because I think you're very good, better than maybe anybody that I know, at extrapolating from the day's events to the big picture of American politics and world politics. And at the Aggie campus today, President Bush is complaining about cables being the cause of all incivility, but he had put out this call for civility on the Aggie campus, and the response to that took the form of protesters posing in a Grim Reaper costume, calling the president a socialist, pasting a Hitler mustache onto the president's picture. From the big picture view of U.S. politics, do you think that at this point we should give up and just see this as the new normal in American rhetoric? Or is it worthy in the big picture to continue to see this as really divisive and a distance from what we've done in the past?
Well, look, this is a shrunken, hardened core of the conservative wing of the Republican Party. And I think that it does actually have consequences that are quite startling. You know, there are a lot of people here. This is not just a fringe group. This is a significant cohort who are engaging in a kind of vituperative, confrontational posture and language that has often led to trouble in American life and certainly in American politics. And I think that right now what you find is a kind of battle inside of the Republican Party saying, oh, good God, that isn't us. But the fact is, the louder the better in this environment we're in, and this community, this group, again, Glenn Beck and the gang, they are hijacking what we once called the Republican Party, and in a way are leading people to say, act now, win back your country, take it back. Words are of real confrontation, which really don't fit with discernible reality as most people know it, most Americans of whatever party. This is a dangerous trend, there is no doubt.
Pulitzer Prize-winning author Ron Suskind, you're a smart guy. Thanks very much for joining us on your Friday night, Ron. It's good to see you.
Nice to be here.